Cultivating Childhood Wellness Through Gardening, a training brought to you by Wisconsin Nutrition, Physical Activity, and Obesity Program, and Community Groundworks. Chapter 2, Planning and Establishing Your Youth and Children's Gardens, featuring selections from Got Dirt, a garden toolkit for implementing youth gardens. Free copies for download are available on the Wisconsin Department of Health Services website at www.dhs.wisconsin.gov. First, form a green team to coordinate garden planning, design, installation, and maintenance. Talk with key decision makers about creating a garden program at your site. Invite teachers, parents, neighbors, principals, and staff to planning meetings and events. Share regular updates about the project through social media and newsletters. Build broad support for your garden by engaging an array of potential stakeholders in the planning process. It is especially important to involve custodians, building staff, and grounds crew in planning the garden. Many other groups can help too. Contact UW Extension educators, master gardener volunteers, local community organizations, botanical gardens, farmers market vendors, area business owners, funders, and students and faculty from area colleges. It can also be helpful to tour other school and community youth gardens to network and share ideas and resources. And most importantly, involve kids in the process. Make sure that kids share their ideas and feel ownership over the garden from the beginning. It is their garden too. Once you are ready to find the best location for your garden, you may want to think about some options around your site. Work with community partners like government entities, UW Extension, or local growers to explore off-site options if needed. Look at Google Maps or other satellite photos of your site. You can also use a map or make one yourself. Together, kids and adults can figure out the best place for your garden. Older students can use a worksheet like this one to examine important outdoor features. With guidance, younger children can help too. Let's go over the key elements a garden needs to thrive. Sunshine. A garden needs at least 6 hours of direct sun each day. There are websites, phone apps, and tools to help determine the amount of sun your site receives. The apps Sun Surveyor and Sun Seeker use your smartphone's GPS and compass to show the sun's path at your site. Online tools such as SunCalc and Solamis use Google Maps to show where and when the sun shines at the location you choose. And there is a handheld tool called a Solar Pathfinder that shows the sun's path on a grid of paper. If you know someone who works for a solar company, they may be able to help you with these tools. Water. Easy access to a nearby water source is a key factor for your garden site. Outside faucets and rain barrels are the most common ways to get water. If hoses are needed at your garden, only buy hoses labeled drinking water safe and PVC free. Always let your hose run for about 5 seconds before using the water. Rain barrels provide a way to collect water for your garden while educating students about water conservation. UW Extension has a number of resources describing the many uses of rain barrels. Soil. The best soil for vegetables and fruits is fertile and well drained. To be sure the potential garden site has healthy soil, first research the site's history and test soil nutrients. For early care sites, in-ground garden locations must be tested for lead. It may be simpler to garden above ground in containers, raised beds, or big pots. These gardens are filled with healthy soil purchased from a garden or landscape center. When soil is tested, the lab will send back a report with results on nutrients and lead if needed. The report will include ideas on how to make the soil and what you may need to add to help plants thrive. It is recommended to test your garden soil every few years. Size. How big should your garden be? Small is okay. If you install a large garden right away, it may be overwhelming to maintain, especially in the summer if kids are not in school. One idea is to make the garden bigger in phases over a few years. The garden can expand in size as interest and support blooms. Kids love to measure. A good measuring tape will help you and your students determine both the size of your garden and its proximity to important features like a water source or a shady gathering area. Counting steps or tracking time is another way to measure distance. You will also want to think about your garden's location and other features around it like buildings, streets, and playgrounds. Consider accessibility, visibility, security, disruption, and noise. For example, a garden that is easy to see from a classroom window can boost students' interest and connection to the garden. At the same time, noise from another class working in the garden could disrupt the classroom inside. Easy access to garden tools will help your garden program thrive. Sheds, storage benches, or buckets keep tools organized and ready to use. Kids also need shade. A shady area near the garden gives kids a place to gather, rest, and work on projects out of the heat of the garden. Once you choose your garden site, you can start planning your garden. Remember that your garden is an outdoor classroom. It's a place to learn and practice skills. Think about interesting design features that kids love to explore. Maybe add a bean teepee or vine-covered tunnel, a secret bench, or a sensory garden. Think about the garden's layout. Paths and gathering places show kids where to move and pause in the garden. In a home garden, paths can be narrow because most of the space is used to grow crops. In a youth garden, open areas give kids a place to gather in groups. Wide paths let kids move freely around the garden together. Not all paths have to be the same size. Wider main paths can connect to narrow paths that lead to different points of interest in the garden. Art projects, like mosaic stepping stones, add beauty to garden pathways. They make the garden unique. The pathways become an art gallery and can boost kids' sense of pride. Archways add mystery and shelter in a garden. Younger kids may like to hide under a roof of vines. Beans, peas, cucumbers, and squash are all great options for vertical growing. Creative shelters can provide wonderful places to gather and sit in the shade, even in the middle of a garden. They are like outdoor rooms. A tent can provide a great place to gather for different garden-related activities or protect people from the rain. Even a camping tent could be used in a garden for younger kids. Remember, it's great to be outdoors in different weather. Entrances and borders help define the edges of your garden and set it apart from the surrounding environment. In some places, gates and fences help protect your garden from hungry animals like deer. Fences can also act as a trellis for climbing plants, improve access, and boost growing space. Gates are another place to add art to your garden. They can be a place to share information too. Think about all the colors, shapes, and themes in your garden. You can include different ways to grow plants like up and over an archway or in a spiral. A public bulletin board is a place to welcome people to your garden and share information. You can post garden tasks, upcoming events, and other garden news. A performance space can expand your garden programming and offer another way for young people to connect to the garden. You can also create an outdoor music area in your garden. Here, kids can experiment with sound, movement, and expression inspired by the garden. A grassy lawn or open space by your garden is a great place for everyone to gather before they enter the garden. It is also a place for active games and group activities. Depending on your site, you may want to install raised garden beds. These beds can be made of untreated lumber, logs, stones, concrete blocks, or metal water troughs. You may also wish to add raised beds or planters so kids of all abilities can garden in your space. Think about the adults who help with the garden. They may be glad for barrier-free gardening too. You can also make raised garden beds without solid edges. These mounded garden beds keep paths neat and help soil drain. Use stakes, strings, and measuring tape to lay out straight garden beds and paths. It is important to let the soil dry before you build the garden beds to avoid soil compaction. Always walk on the paths and not the garden for the same reason. Depending on the size and location of your new garden, you might need to remove the grass with a sod cutter. You may also need to use a rototiller if the soil is hard. Good garden soil is crumbly when it's ready to plant. To check, take a handful of soil and squeeze it lightly. If it breaks apart easily, the soil is ready to go. If the soil stays in a ball, it needs to dry out more. Be careful not to till wet soil. To improve the health of your garden soil, you can add compost to your garden beds or grow cover crop. Cover crops are plants like buckwheat or winter rye that are grown to feed the soil. It is fun to make and learn about compost in your garden. Compost ingredients can include plants from the garden, tree leaves, and fruit and vegetable scraps from school or center meals. There are many different ways to make compost bins using wire fencing, pallets, concrete blocks, or containers. Composting with worms is another great way to make compost and learn about decomposition. This process is called vermicomposting. Learn more about composting with resources from UW Extension. If you don't have access to land at your school or center, you can still grow an awesome garden. Many plants thrive in containers. Keep in mind that container gardens generally need to be watched closely because they dry out faster than gardens in the ground. Container gardens may also need extra nutrients from compost or organic plant food. Container gardens can add some fun and art to your garden. With containers, you can locate your garden almost anywhere. If you have the funds and the space, a greenhouse is a great place to teach garden skills in different seasons. Kids can learn how to extend the growing season and how to start garden plants from seed each spring. Another option that costs less money is a hoop house. It's like a simple greenhouse made of a steel frame set on the bare ground and covered with plastic. Cold frames are like tiny greenhouses in the garden. The cold frames help trap heat and warm the soil so you can grow early in the spring and late in the fall. There are lots of good designs and materials you can use for your cold frames. The frames can be made out of plastic, plexiglass, or even windows. As you plan your garden project, it is important to make a budget. The budget will help your group think about costs and priorities. It will also be a tool to raise money and find support for your project. New gardens are an exciting adventure. So far, you have built a strong garden team, found the best location, thought about garden elements, and made a program budget. Next, you can break ground on your new garden with confidence.